We'll go ahead and bring the October 6th, 2022 Board of Adjustment meeting to order. Madam Secretary, roll call, please.
Clay Thomas,
Here.
Rob Pierce,
Present.
Don Christensen,
Here.
Kathy Julian,
Here.
Brad Stanley.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. If all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Large, Ethics Law Announcement.
Board members are reminded that if with respect to any matter or any person coming before the board today, you've received a gift or loan, you have a pecuniary interest, you have a commitment in a private capacity, such as a family, employment, business, or similar relationship, or you provide a representation or counseling before an agency to a person or entity for compensation within the last year on a matter being considered, you must disclose that gift, loan, interest, commitment, or prior representation at the time the matter is being considered. And you must furthermore abstain from deliberation or voting on the matter if it is clear that the gift, loan, interest, commitment, or prior representation would materially affect the independence of judgment of a reasonable person. Board members are also reminded that under the Board of Adjustment rules, if you had contact outside this meeting with any person interested in a matter coming before the board today, you should disclose the nature of that contact at this meeting.
Thank you. Appeals procedure, Mr. Bronstick.
Most decisions rendered by the Board of Adjustment are appealable to the Board of County Commissioners. If you disagree with the decision of the Board of Adjustment and qualify as an aggrieved person or party, you may appeal in writing within 10 calendar days from the date that the decision being appealed is reduced to writing, filed with the Secretary of the Board of Adjustment, and mailed to the original applicant in the proceeding being appealed, in accordance with Washoe County Code. Please call the planning staff immediately at 328-6100 for information on the appeal procedure and the application fee.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Comment heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the agenda. However, action may not be taken on any matter raised during the public comment period until the matter is specifically listed on the agenda as an agenda item. Comments may be made to the Board of Adjustment as a whole. Madam Secretary, is there anyone wishing to speak on this?
I do not have any public comment registered in chambers.
Thank you.
And I have no hands raised via Zoom.
Thank you. Moving on, approval of the October 6th, 2022 agenda. Before I accept a motion, as I understand it, we do have one agenda item that is being withdrawn. I believe Staff Representative Oakley is here and can address that issue for us.
Kat Oakley, Washoe County Planning. Yes, item 8C, which is administrative permit case number WA-Admin 22-0020, Chapman care of the infirm, has been withdrawn.
Thank you. In addition to that, there's been a request made by staff that item 8H, which is special use permit, WSUP 220021, the O'Neill grading, be moved to the second agenda item to be heard. Is there any discussion on that? Thank you. With that, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley.
This is Rob for the record. I second it.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The October 6th, 2022 agenda is approved. Next item is approval of the August 4th, 2022 draft minutes. Any discussion on this agenda item? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion on this.
This is Rob for the record. I move that we accept it as written.
Thank you. Second?
Don, for the record, I second that motion.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Motion approves unanimously. Moving on to the first item on the agenda, amendment to condition case number WAC 22-0007, Connect Neighborhood Center extension of time for WSUP 20-0009. At this moment in time, what I'd like to do is, I don't believe it is necessary to bring staff forward to give us a presentation on this. We're all acutely aware of what it was about. It was approved back in July of 2024, and the applicant is only asking for an extension for 2 years, which would bring the date up to July 24th, 2024. Is there any discussion on it? Wait a minute, I'm sorry. Before we do that, the applicant is present. Does the applicant wish to address anything on this item?
I can't hear you. What case number are you working on?
We're working on the very first agenda item, which is WSUP 20-0009. It's the Connect Neighborhood Center extension of time.
I have 0019.
No, we're not on that item.
Not yet?
No.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. That being said, is there any public comment on this item?
I have no hands raised via Zoom.
Thank you.
And I have no public comment in chambers.
Thank you. With that, we'll bring it back to the board, either for a motion or discussion. First discussion. Mr. Stanley?
Mr. Chair, if I've got the correct item, this is the extension of time, is that correct?
That is correct. It's the first item on the agenda, yes.
I know that a couple of us live in that area, and I'm very concerned about a 2-year extension, since there's been so much change, and the change is so rapid in that area, in terms of the, I want to say the complexion of the neighborhood. Since we approved it the first time, at the time, as I recall, there was a very large Washoe County Schools District project going in. It hadn't been completed yet, I think, but that is drawing a great deal of traffic. There are security concerns. The location of the item in question is, as I recall, backs up to one of their very late found in the process emergency exits, and so I am wondering, and this is probably a question for planning as well as a question here at the board, if that 2-year, I know it's traditional, and if that 2-year can be shortened such that as we see developments in the community take place, we can determine how best to handle this next time.
Chris Bronzik, Washoe County Planning. The applicant specifically requested for a 2-year extension. Washoe County tradition has been to grant that 2-year extension. When this did come in, it did come in right at the start of the construction of that new school. Mm-hmm. The school district did review it at that time. I would say that unless the applicant requests or is agreeable to the to a 1-year extension, that we keep to the original request of 2 years.
Okay. Mr. Chair, if I may, Chris, as I mentioned to you, and as I left a voicemail for you earlier on this issue, so how would that be, what would be the mechanics of this requesting that the client, the applicant, amend their request to 1 year rather than 2? What would we need to do, what would I need to do here in my chair to do this?
I believe, Mr. Stanley, what it would be is you can make a motion for that instead of the 2-year down to 1 year, and then it could be voted upon by the rest of the board members.
Yeah, I heard that part, Mr. Chair. What I was curious about, I think if I understood Chris correctly, we would have to ask the applicant. Is that correct?
No. Mr. Stanley, this is Michael Large for the record from the District Attorney's Office. This is a request for a 2-year extension. This board has the discretion to make any changes they want in regard to the extension length of time in terms of the conditions of approval. So it's within your discretion to make the 1 year. The applicant does not need to consent to that. However, as Mr. Brosnick said, there is a reason, a method to their madness, so to speak, in regard to why they've asked for a 2-year extension.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Broschek. Any other questions?
I don't think so. So if this is, has this been brought before the board then for us to discuss?
It,
Yes.
it is now before the board for, yes, it's brought back to the board for discussion.
And then I'll go ahead and pursue this a bit. I know, Clay, if I'm correct, that you live up in that area, and you know the changes that have been taking place there. And a lot of them are community-oriented developments and so forth. Most recently, I think we accepted or authorized or agreed with a request by Washoe County Engineering for a big water transfer station on that very same road. And there was some question about the traffic on that road and how we would do cutouts for safety and so forth, because there are children, students, running up and down that road, or walking up and down that road, skateboarding up that road, bicycling up that road. And so additional traffic may not be was our concern at the time, and the types of traffic. So I have a serious concern as more projects go in about a delay of 2 years for this particular use. And that's why I'm suggesting, or I'd like to entertain the notion amongst our group here, that that be reduced to a 1-year extension because of the speed of growth.
Thank you. I guess I look at it a little bit differently. I'm more in favor of the 2-year extension. You do have that major project going in there, and you also have that school that is going in there. If you give these individuals an opportunity of 2 years out, then you're really not compressing a lot of activity at the same time, creating more traffic as you're hauling dirt and as you're bringing materials and everything like that. I think that's, for me, that smooths the water a little bit by allowing a 2-year extension.
Mr. Chair, if I may, Recording Secretary, there's been a request if the members could please speak into their microphones so that the audience can hear the discussion. Thank you.
Okay.
In response to that, it was my understanding that, if I understood, and I may have misunderstood Mr. Large, it was a matter of 2 years before they began.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. In regard, I mean, this is a request for a 2-year extension.
That's right. And what needs to happen within that 2 years? Anything? Or is that before they begin?
Mr. Brownstedt, could you clarify that for us?
Chris Bronzik, Washoe County Planning. So the 2-year extension approves the proposed use type. And so within this time frame, they have 2 years to submit complete building plans to start the build-out process. So this just extends their ability to complete the process for 2 years.
And by process, you mean the paper process?
I mean the permitting process.
Right.
Yeah.
So, thank you. So I'm thinking then, Mr. Chair, that doesn't have any impact on the grading with compressed time and so forth.
Okay, thank you. More
Yeah.
questions? Go ahead.
Kathy Julian for the record. My concern here is that the reason given, I believe, for the extension was that they needed to raise money. And to get to the permitting process will entail planning, and I suppose they'll need to understand how much money do they have for the planning that they need. So I'm afraid that a 1-year extension might not be sufficient for them to bring this project to a successful completion. And secondly, the project does appear to be very community-oriented. Although I don't live up in that area, it seems, and it says that it's oriented towards people of all ages, including children. So, and it talks about walkways being integrated with the schools. So I get some sense that they're trying to provide a community resource. So for all of those reasons, I would support giving them the 2-year frame that they asked for.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this item?
This is Rob for the record. I support giving them a 2-year extension for the exact same reasons.
Thank you. Any further? With that, I will entertain a motion.
Well,
This is Rob for the record. I move that after giving reasonable consideration of information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Board of Adjustments approve amendment of conditions, case number WAC 22-0007 for Sage Property Ventures LLC, with the conditions included in Exhibit A to this matter having made all 5 findings in accordance with Washoe County Code Section 110.810.30.
Thank you. Second?
For the record, Don Christensen, I second that motion.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition, opposed?
Nay.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda, special use case number. It's actually listed as 8H, but it is WSUP 22-0021, the O'Neill grading. We have Mr. Brownscheck for a presentation.
Chris Bronzik, Washoe County Planning. We're looking at WSUP 22-0021 for O'Neill grading. This is a major grading special use permit request specific to landscaping ponds. They are also requesting to vary one standard, which is Washoe County Code Section 110-438-45C, which limits the maximum difference from natural grade to 10 feet. The total grading proposed is 7,420 cubic yards of cut, 5,250 cubic yards of fill, with a total disturbance of 0.9 acres. The cut and fill are both triggers for the major grading. This is located at 11090 Thomas Creek Road. The site parcel is 18.13 acres, and it is split zoned with 82% high-density rural and 18% general rural. The general rural portion is located within a hydrological resource, a creek area. Before you is the proposed site plan. As you can see, it is a large single-family residence that is being proposed with a smaller landscape pond in the front yard and a significantly larger pond in the backyard. So the applicant did submit initially a building permit to Washoe County Planning that has been routed and approved by planning. That permit is WBLD 22-100028. That approved permit allowed for 4,720 cubic yards of cut and 2,550 cubic yards of fill. That permit also did include, at the time, the preliminary start of the proposed ponds, as you can see from the cutouts on the image above. Because the request, because of Washoe County's grading standards are cumulative, because of the additional request for these ponds, that is what triggered the SUP, those, the additional grading required is roughly 2,700 cubic yards of additional cut and fill. As mentioned, the applicant is seeking to vary one standard, which allows for, which requires a maximum difference of natural grade from 10 feet. They're requesting a difference of 18 feet. The specific reason for that request, the applicant noted in their proposal, is to allow for wildlife such as trout and other aquatic life to thrive. Staff does support this request, partly because the difference within the grade is covered underwater. Additionally, it is also partially masked by the ornamental landscape that is proposed. Staff is recommending approval with conditions. I have a possible motion before you above, and I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? Mr. Stanley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris, first of all, I want to say, very nice package, and I appreciated reading NDOW and RTC feedback as well, so thanks for including that and making sure they were prominent there. I visited the site, and it sounds like a great project, and you can almost visualize it, and quite an addition, I would think, to the neighborhood. I guess the only concern I have, and maybe you can address it, I know it was addressed somewhat in the RTC memo, but as you know, Thomas Creek is very narrow at where the equipment would come in and come out. Did you have an opportunity to visit the site? Do you have any questions or concerns yourself, or any way to ameliorate, or anything that would make us think that will work without a problem?
I did visit the site. I don't have any specific concerns. The proposal that they have related to the specific gradings is quite narrow. Obviously, there's going to be construction still going on with the home, but due to the narrow scope of this, I didn't have any significant concerns.
Okay, thank you. And I guess a follow-on to that would be, given the neighborhood, have you stipulated, and forgive me if I missed it, times of operation here?
I did not put it in the conditions of approval. It is code. They are going to be required to meet that, whether it's condition approval or not, though.
And the code is 7 till when?
7 to 7, Monday through Saturday. No construction allowed on Sundays.
All right, thanks.
Yes, Julian.
And just to note, I do see 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. in here in the conditions. It was said that the comments provided conditions Washoe Story Conservation District, and there's no X there on page 7. But they did in their comment provide some conditions, I thought, talking about landscaping. Have you captured that adequately on page 12, under point F at the top of the page where it talks about every vegetation plan? Is that, I assume that their conditions are captured there?
So with the Story Conservation District, there's no mechanism for them to enforce their code, their conditions. So staff, whether it's through planning or various other agencies, do try to capture them. We did try to capture their conditions, specifically with the revegetation. Typically, our Parks Division and our Engineering Division would capture additional conditions from the Story Conservation District.
Any other questions? Ms. Browncheck, I do have, maybe you can clarify this for me, the request for the variance of the 18 feet. Does that mean that the depth of the pond then is going down to be about 18 feet below grade?
That was my understanding, but the applicant is present and can speak to that a little more clearly.
Okay, we'll ask him in just a minute then. Any more questions for staff? Seeing none, thank you. And the applicant is present. Does he wish to address this issue? Applicant or representative?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Mike Vicks. I'm with Monte Vista Consulting, representing Chris O'Neill. I'd like to thank Chris for his presentation, and we have a presentation that I think might help clear up some of the concerns and just make it, I don't know, I'm very unfamiliar with this process, so if I'm erratic with the slides, bear with me, please. So this is a picture of the site. You can see Thomas Creek is there on the right. Thomas Creek Road is on the left, and the site is pretty much centered there. Just to the left of the Google location icon is where this pond is proposed. The big pond is proposed. Some of this Chris has already kind of hit on. I thought we might be presenting first, but he's already taken care of most of this. Again, I'd like to reiterate, most of the grading associated with this site has already been approved and permitted and may have already commenced even without the need for a special use permit. The applicant reduced the size of his ponds in order to get the building permit approved, and then wanted to come back through this process to make sure that everything was above board with the proposed improvements. And so that's where it's at. Again, both ponds are already existing, permitted existing at least, and the 18-foot is at the lowest. That's a differential between existing and proposed grade. I'll get to it when we get to that slide, and I can kind of explain, but it's not going to be 18 feet deep total. The goal is to have a deeper pond. He's going to do trout and bass potentially, and those need a cooler water source. And so a shallow pond is going to get warmer. A deeper pond will have cooler water at the bottom for that aquatic life. Additionally, from a stormwater perspective, the pond is the lower pond is the ultimate catchment for all on-site drainage. So everything that we've got a drainage swale that wraps around the entire development and kind of directs flow in there to act as a stormwater treatment source and detention. So that should alleviate those concerns. And then the approved building permit had a net fill requirement, and with if this application is approved, the additional excavation will go to fill on site. So there won't be a lot of trucking on or off site. It'll reduce the import of material essentially. This is what has been permitted. Maybe I don't know if I can, but you can see the pond to the left is the smaller pond above. It's kind of a smaller shape, and then what we'll do is we'll go to the next slide, which shows the grading proposed with the grading special use permit has been highlighted in green there. And so the ponds are expanded when compared to the building permit. And then also there's, with that expansion tying into the approved driveway and everything, there's a little bit more grading associated outside of the pond, which will be landscaped, and we'll get to the landscape plan momentarily. Below the lower pond, again, that pond is extended to the south. The limits of the pond are kind of hard to identify, but at this scale. But and then there's a slope back to existing. The comment about the impact to Thomas Creek, I'd like to point out on the lower pond, you can see that heavier dashed line. That's the limits of the sensitive stream zone, and no grading of any kind is proposed, even in the sensitive stream zone, nowhere near the high sensitivity or the actual bed of the creek. So we're staying well away from that. And that was a condition of the original building permit, and this is a tentative landscaping plan. Since a landscape plan is not required by code, we wanted to share with you what the applicant's actual plans are, but these are probably subject to minor modifications as he actually develops. But the front pond will be landscaped. And he's got a big open pasture lawn area up there. That pond has an outlet. It'll go underneath a bridge that feeds the lower pond, and then there's a circulation pump that pumps the water back around so that it's running. And then the lower pond, again, will have planting all around it and a more lawn pasture, I don't know how kept the intent of that lawn is, but upon completion, everything will be stabilized. There's no intent to really revegetate. I think his plan is to manicure, essentially. With that, I'd just like to thank you guys for your time and consideration. We're more than happy to answer any questions you have, and we'll let you take it away. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vicks, getting back to the question, my original question of the depth of the pond, what would be the average depth of the deepest part of the pond or ponds?
If we can, well,
I can put
You can just give me an estimate. That's
I think it's 12 to 14 feet, based on my recollection. The reason we've got that differential is because the site's kind of sloping and, the water is obviously gonna lay flat. So to get the depth, we had to excavate back, pull that slope back into it's not a hillside, but we're creating a 3-to-1 slope into the pond. And so we had to pull that back to get the necessary depth, which is what resulted in a net 18-foot differential between existing grade and the bottom of the pond. But the water surface elevation, I believe, is much, is less than that.
okay. And then my second question for you is I don't know if I heard correctly, but you said that a building permit was already issued, which included the ponds, and you're back before us today for an SUP to increase the size of the ponds?
Correct. So the ponds, we can go back to the slide, but the ponds, a portion of each of the ponds that's in conformance with the grading standards that do not require a special use permit. So there is no more than 10 feet of differential between the existing proposed grade, and then all of the earthwork volumes are in accordance with the grading standards that do not require a special use permit. And so these green areas are the areas that are intended for expansion of the pond, and then the necessary grading associated outside of the pond to create a natural look to it. And so you can see on the upper pond, we show the contours on the left-hand side there. And I think I can even go back one slide more. You can see the shape of, we could just look at the pond on the left is the upper pond. We'll kind of bounce back and forth here real quick. You can see how it's more of a kind of peanut shape now as opposed to just a circle. And then similarly, the lower pond had a smaller southern, expansion. I don't know how we want to term that. And so it grows with the expansion. And so the goal is to, again, get the upper pond, that's just the landscaped look that he wanted to achieve up there. And specifically in the lower pond, we wanted to get the depth for that aquatic life because he intends to stock it with fish.
And is there anything that would prevent you from staying within the original building permit for the size of those ponds?
Well, the building permit is approved. We can stick with that. The intent is to expand it, which is why we're before you. And so we cannot expand those ponds without, triggering a special use permit. So like I said, the applicant wanted us to, keep everything above board and get all of the grading proposed approved.
Well, we appreciate that.
I mean, it's already approved, so most of the work is already approved. Like Chris mentioned, there's 2,700 cubic yards of material that is remaining between the two ponds of excavation. And again, all of that will be balanced on site ultimately. So approval of this should honestly reduce the amount of trucking and off-site movement of material, because without the approval of this special use permit, the applicant would need to bring in that 2,700 cubic yards of material to fill the remainder of the site, which is again already approved and in conformance with code.
Okay. And then my last question for you is just trying to get an actual visual of how big these two ponds are. Do you happen to know about gallons each pond would contain?
I honestly have no, no idea.
Because I did some real quick, high-end calculating on what I got, and I know an Olympic-sized swimming pool is 648,000 gallons, and it looks like between these two ponds, they'll be bigger than that. So I was just kind of trying to get an
honestly,
idea.
I don't want to venture a guess and be incorrect on that. I can pull up AutoCAD and do a volume analysis real quick, but.
No, it was just me trying to get an idea of seeing how big these ponds were in relationship to everything. That's okay. We don't have to go much further on that and take up the board's time on that, so.
I don't know, he has a swimming pool proposed next to the house. I don't know if that's really a good, I don't know, it's not an Olympic swimming size pool, so I don't know what the reference would be, but that there's kind of the scale of the overall site. And so it's a large pond, the lower one. The upper pond is a good sized pond as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions for this gentleman? Mr. Christensen?
Thank you. Just for simplification, clarify in my own mind, the main reason for the SUP is the mean depth of the pond?
It's
Not
both-
necessarily the perimeter, but the actual depth.
Well, it's the volume of earthwork, and so we came very close to the threshold of grading special use permit with
Okay.
the approved building permit, and so to expand it, the earthwork volume triggers the special use permit, and then again, the depth is the variation of standards. Again, that is also a trigger for a grading special use permit, and so both volume and depth.
Okay. And second question, in my reading, it seems to me that there's not really an impound on Thomas Creek. It's not a dam. It's
No.
free-flowing.
Yeah, it is, there is no dam, there's no earthen structure created. This is a hole in the ground. It's not a levee up above that could pose a risk of, if it was built incorrectly, flooding downstream or anything. This is below the, existing ground surface for I believe, the entirety of it, so.
Well, that's what I interpreted, but
Yeah.
better to hear it from you than have to read all this boilerplate again. Yeah, that satisfies me. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Ms. Julian.
I have a simple question. How are you going, where does the water come from for this pond?
The applicant has already reached out to the water master. Some of that water is diverted from Thomas Creek. He has the water rights, and I don't know if that was included in the application, but I know as part of our building permit application that was provided to the county, all of that has been, already gone through all the proper channels. So, and then I believe he also has some groundwater rights. I don't know how I don't know the intent there, but the main source will be Thomas Creek and his existing water rights. And then you can see from the plan, it fills the pond and then goes back into Thomas Creek. So it's detaining the water. It's not stealing it forever after it initially fills up anyway.
Thank you. Any other further questions? Mr. Stanley?
Could you put the project map up again, the one with the design, please? Because I have a question when we get there. There we go. Where will and could you point out Thomas Creek again, please?
You have, not on the clicker, but right in front of you, there's a little laser pointer on the podium by your right hand.
Oh,
There you
okay.
go.
So Thomas Creek is honestly probably over here.
Okay.
It's, I don't know.
Try that again, please.
So it's probably over here. I can't remember. I think this is 150 feet.
Okay.
Or no, let's let's go to the next slide. This, I believe, is 150 feet from the creek. And so,
Excuse me, Thomas Creek Road.
oh, Thomas Creek Road.
Yeah.
I apologize.
Please. And I think that maybe there's a, yeah.
And so, the road is here. I don't know the length of this, property line off the top of my
Right.
head. I know I could do a deep dive into my Dropbox and find it. But, it's, I can look and check for you real quick. It's behind the house. It's
Actually, to save you
significant.
some math,
Almost
I was wondering where you
12
thought the
times the size.
exit and access and would be for the construction equipment off.
Oh,
Would it
construction
be
equipment.
multiple points, or will it be single point, or what are you thinking?
There's 2 points proposed, both of the proposed driveways here and here.
Uh-huh.
And as part of the building permit, that work, again, has already been approved, and we've filed our permits with NDEP and everybody.
No worries there. Would you expect that the construction equipment to dig out the ponds and so forth would come in through those 2 access points?
I would imagine, yes.
Okay. And by the way, just on my site, I agree with you that the ponds are, I don't want to say downhill, but downhill of Thomas Creek Road. So
Correct.
there's a slope downward, so
Correct,
underscore what you said there. All right, thank you very much.
absolutely.
Thank you. Any further questions for this gentleman? See none? Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your consideration.
You bet. Madam Secretary, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this matter?
I do. First up, I have Ski Shields, followed by John Shields. And when you get to the podium, if you could just state your first and last name, please. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ski Shields. I live on the corner of Thomas Creek and Foothill, and we've spent the last 4 years under heavy construction with regard to the property across, adjacent to this property, and the property adjacent to ours across Thomas Creek. We've got a number of concerns. Number one, what they say, just starting with what you guys have asked, what they have said with regard to when they start and when they finish is a whole line of garbage. You know, at 4:45, you've got Campbell's guys going in and filling up and starting their engines and doing all that and really raising a lot of ruckus and that's well before 7 o'clock in the morning. These guys have been out there working on the foundation for this particular property here. But what no one has addressed is where the water goes. This is all 100-year floodplain. And so the grading that you guys are talking about is great when it's significant to dry, nothing going on land. But there was wetlands on the adjacent property, and there's been a history of when it comes down, depending on whether, we've been there for 50 years, and whether or not where the water does in fact go. We're not even sure, you know, with the new properties, they subdivided the properties that was across the street. That was a huge pasture. It was the Charmy Cliff Harris property that they had bought, but originally there was no house there. They spent lots of time building that concrete structure and then spent a lot of time ultimately selling it. The things that kind of concern me and concern with regard to our property and the people downstream is there's a lot of runoff when they're, like we can just say a month ago, when we had 2 or 3 days of significant rain, it all runs somewhere. And because of the grading across the street, which they didn't really deal with grading as much as they dealt with lifting the structures above the water plane. And so now we have houses that are sitting at 4 and 5 feet above the road line, but there's nothing to stop it from coming around it. And we see it every time on Thomas Creek. When there's a spring, when there's a spring rain and the snows get melted quickly, or a late fall rain when we get an early snow
Okay,
ends up.
Mr. Shields, your time is up, so we have other people too, so we appreciate your comments. But if we can go ahead and have the next individual. Thank you, sir.
Next up, I have John Shields, followed by Ann Rodwald.
Hi, I'm John Shields. I'm his father, and you know where we live. Yeah, my concern, one of it is when you're talking about stocking this pond with various wildlife, does anybody have concerns about the fact that I have, is that whether any of that is going to escape into Thomas Creek? There are certain types of fish and wildlife that can be dangerous if it goes through into Thomas Creek. And is any of the water that's being used coming from a well, or is it just all going to be coming from Thomas? How is it going to come from Thomas Creek? There's not a lot of flow in Thomas Creek right now, or even in the water in the ditches. There's not a whole lot of flow, and so there needs to be recirculation. There's major concerns about standing water where you'd have a lot of insects like mosquitoes. That could be a major problem. So I don't know whether any of that has been answered. Unfortunately, we didn't know anything about when the ponds were put in to start with, about those issues in terms of how that's going to affect the environment and how it's going to affect the Thomas Creek and the flow of water in the area, and also the water level. So you're going down, 18 feet. So that's also a very deep area, which would be a concern. I mean, if other wildlife strayed in and got into the pond for drowning, even a person. I don't know whether any of those things, those would be a comment from my concern. So mainly, where's the water going, and is there any control for how the wildlife in that pond will be contained, or is that going to be, because I know there are certain types of trout you don't want to go into Thomas Creek, and I've had that before because I have a little pond myself. So those are all questions which I don't know that have been answered at all. But those are very big ponds. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, I have Ann Rodwald, followed by David Emmel.
I'm Ann Rodewald, and I live directly across from the end of Foothill on Thomas Creek Road. And we have had a lot of construction next door to us, and now this one that's opened up, and they're doing all the construction. One of my concerns also is about the water and how it flows, because it's an alluvial plain, which means it flows downhill. The last time we had the quote-unquote 100-year flood, it went down, and in our property, it goes directly down the driveway. But with the construction next door to us, and they put in all that fill, there's like 10 feet of fill in there that they put in just to build up the barn and the house. And we're looking at it and we're like, so now where's the water gonna go? Well, it's gonna go down the road next door to us and probably flood our house. And the other thing about the wildlife and stuff is, in the fall, we get bears. If they put a lot of fish in that pond, you're gonna attract more bears before they go into hibernation. The other thing is with those big ponds, you're gonna get a lot of water evaporation. Where is this water coming from that they're gonna fill into the ponds? I don't know, but I sure would like to know. So, you know, if it's coming from Thomas Creek, or like we live not exactly next door to Thomas Creek, but our neighbor next to us does, and we get ditch water. Well, the ditch water channel is right next to Thomas Creek as you go farther up the creek towards the west. And quite frankly, it has holes in it. And sometimes it dumps into the creek, and sometimes the creek dumps into the fill. So water is definitely an issue because, you know, we're talking Nevada, it's dry here. And the other part is that we found that there's not, when they come and build, we actually went next door to the people next door to us and asked the guy who was head of the construction, can you please start at 7, not at 6:30, whatever. And they were very nice about it. And they've done that all along. And occasionally they work Saturday, but not, depends upon what part they're putting in. Are they putting in windows? If they're doing fill, they get it there really early. I know that. And actually the people were very nice. And they came over and said, we're sorry about all our construction and dirt and everything, and so we got a gift basket. But they were trying. But I still feel that the biggest issue is the water, and it better not be coming out of Thomas Creek or the ditch. And do they even have ditch rights? Those are my concerns.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have David Emmel.
Hello, Dave Immel. That was my wife. So we live on the west side of Thomas Creek Road from this project and next door to the one that's being built on the west side. Basically the same thing as everybody else been saying. My biggest concern is from what I could see on the map, and I have a construction engineering degree, so I can kind of read grade lines, and it looks like the bottom part of that pond, yes, it's gonna be dug in, but there's fill there to retain it. So what's gonna happen when you get a flood? It's gonna wash that out, and it's not gonna affect me because I'm uphill from it. I have friends that live below that, and they're probably gonna have issues. And when we first bought our property back in 2013, we came to the county and we were gonna do an addition, and we were told, hey, we're in a flood zone, that we'd have to bring the whole house up to grade, or up to code, in order to get this addition. Well, I haven't figured out how to bring the basement up out of the flood zone yet, so I'm still working on that. But if that's the case, then I don't see how building an extra retaining dam, so to speak, is what's gonna happen to hold this water back for this larger pond. I think it's just a danger for everybody downstream. Because what the county told us, that everybody, especially down along by the freeway, 395, that's a big dam down there. It's gonna flood all those people, and none of that area is considered flood zone. Where, like my wife said, we've talked to the previous owners, they said they had a 100-year flood back in the 50s when our house was built in 1948, and the water just runs down the driveway. It doesn't go anywhere near a basement, but we're still in the flood zone because that's how the Corps of Engineers did it back whenever, and it's a little expensive to try and change that, so. But, like again, just reiterate what everybody else said as far as what's gonna happen in water in case of a flood. I'm all for someone trying to have their own fishing pond. That's great. I wish I had one. And then also, it's very rocky around there. They're gonna have to import some sort of material or something to line the pond so it doesn't leak. Because where it's at, like I said, it's typical Nevada, it's extremely rocky. So I don't know if they're bringing in a liner or if they're gonna haul in like some clay soil, so that will impact the road. We've had some issues with, the road kind of deteriorating just from the one next door to us. And it's a narrow road, and I see when they're having fences and everything put up next door, including this property, this is subject about, that they're holding the fences way back from Thomas Creek Road, so I assume that's for future development when the road may or may not get improved. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have no further public comment in chambers.
And I have no hands raised via Zoom.
Thank you very much. With that, we'll go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the board for discussion. Well, I'll start. One of my concerns was the issue of the water, but within the staff report, it does indicate that Washoe County Water Resource Manager was contacted, and the Nevada Division of Water Resources was also contacted, and evidently, at least as far as I can tell within the body of the report, that in fact there are water rights for that property, and that's basically what would be used to fill the two ponds. So I agree, you know, water is a scarcity around here, but as we've had these discussions before, the ability to secure water rights would allow you to go ahead and implement this project. Any other questions? Mr. Stanley?
I don't think this is necessarily a question, but I agree with you, by the way, on the water issue. It's gone through the process, and we're acting on the information that we have here on the staff report. The one area that I think, and along those lines, I noticed, and thank you again, Chris, for putting NDOW on the list, who will be they're very strict about invasive species and that kind of thing. So that concern, at least for me, is substantially reduced. They're an exemplary agency, I believe, maybe even standout. The area where I think we can have some positive effect for the community might be time of work. And in the past, we have made a stipulation or suggested a condition that mobilization begin at 7 rather than hammers fly or engines kick up or actual digging takes place. And that's been successful a number of times. And that eliminates that 5 o'clock in the morning mobilization noise as everybody rolls in and gets their gear set up. And that's the most racket you're gonna get out of construction anyway. I would, you know, I'll defer to the experts here, but if we have mobilization at 7, that'll help ameliorate your concerns about the noise. So I would suggest that as a condition.
And if I could, just a reminder again to speak into your microphones. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion on this matter? Ms. Julian?
Just a query perhaps for staff. Do the permits that, or the conditions that were set by the water resource people, it says here that some permits have already been, water rights obtained and so forth. Was that with respect to the previous design of the smaller ponds, or does that also apply to the larger pond, the deeper pond?
Thank you. Would the representative or staff like to come up and address that, please?
Chris Brunswick, Washoe County Planning. Water resources, both at the state and county level, were reviewing this proposal for the larger ponds. The water rights would have been obtained before the permits would have been submitted, the discretionary action.
And further, it was sent to NDOW, but I don't see that they responded.
NDOW was a recipient. We did not receive any comments of concern or conditions of approval from NDOW.
Does the county often, I mean, if they had no comment, would they respond with no comment? Or are we sure that they really reviewed this and understood what was happening here? And that gets back to the issue of the fish perhaps somehow getting back into the creek.
Unknown. Unfortunately, that's an unknown. Most of our specific area plans do require NDOW to be a reviewer. So we do send quite a lot of cases over to NDOW. If there are concerns within specific projects, we do receive comments back from NDOW. This is one of those cases that we did not receive any from.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Stanley.
Two questions, Chris. First, is silence from agencies generally considered to be acquiescence or positive? No concerns?
That's typically how staff has taken it. I don't want to speak for those agencies, though.
Mhm. But that's the staff position
Yes.
that we were delivered in our package?
When I deliver the package, we state whether they have provided comments, no comments, or conditions.
Okay. Thank you. And the second question is, as you could probably tell, I'm going to suggest a condition that, socialize a condition, that mobilization take place at 7 rather than start of formal construction at 7. We've done that in the past. Do you see an issue with that?
It's at the board's discretion. We've seen it in the past on both BOA items and planning commission items.
Easy enough mechanically to do, to request that?
Yes.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Yeah, I think a point of clarification on here too is actually when it says reviewing agencies, there were 16 agencies that were contacted. So I think a wide variety of agencies that could have added comments were in fact included. Whether they choose to or not is something different. I can tell you that Nevada Water Resources provided conditions, Washoe County Land Development conditions, Washoe County Water Rights Manager conditions, Washoe County Health District Environmental Health conditions, and a couple more were also there. So I think it was well reviewed. Everybody had a chance to give their input on this project. Any other comments? Mr. Pierce?
Yeah, this is Rob for the record. I just for a point of clarification, they've already got a permit to build the ponds, right? So they're just asking for a little bit bigger of a pond. So they've already gone through all the permit process and all that.
That is correct.
Okay.
The ponds are much smaller, but yes.
Yes, okay. Just want to make sure that I'm clear on that. Thank you.
Ms. Julian?
Yes. Are you aware if in the original application for this and the approval of the ponds that NDOW commented and provided perhaps some conditions? Do we have any understanding of that?
Building permits typically do not get routed to state agencies. So this would have been their time to comment.
Also, to build on what Mr. Pierce said, and to me it looks like what the applicant did is, in order to expedite this process, what he did is he submitted his building permits that were well within the specifications to include the ponds. And then after the fact, and maybe that was his original intent, we do not know, but at least to start the process was to get that going with the ponds their size and then come back before this committee to put in a special use permit to expand that. So I think by doing the special use permit, the appropriate agencies were probably contacted. I'm not too sure, like you said, the building permit would not contact state agencies. So thank you for clarifying that. Mr. Christensen.
I'll make this brief. On face value, I didn't really like this project, but I think the applicant has done a great job, and staff has done an equally good job. And it's, in my opinion, that we should, without a lot of fanfare, go ahead and approve this special use permit. I like it.
Thank you, sir. Any other additional comments? Mr. Stanley?
Just agreeing with Mr. Christensen, and the site visit did a lot for me, and it seems in keeping, and I like the fact that all the water was downhill from the road, and my concern was getting the gear in and out, and I think the follow-on concern that still remains is the hours of construction for the folks that are neighbors. Other than that, it seems like all the boxes have been checked with Endow doing their job when they get called to do so.
And this is Rob for the record. Yeah, and the water goes in and then it goes back out, so it's continually being recirculated through there, so.
Any other further comments? With that, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, could we ask Chris to modify that, give us the language for the modification of the hours of operation, so they could be read into the record if we choose to do that, which I think we have consensus on that. So Chris, if you could give us the language that you would like that calls for mobilization at 7.
Let me just step in here real quick. Under conditions, on page 11, under item, it was here in front of me, I'm sorry, under item 1D, it says construction hours are 7 a.m., 7 p.m., Monday through Saturday. That's contained in the conditions right now. If you wish to restructure that or submit a motion,
That's
can do
what
that.
I was asking. Since we're talking about not starting at 7, but mobilizing at 7, for the sake of the surrounding neighborhood, which saves them the 445 noise that they were talking about. And we all kind of know that's how it works. So, and we've done this in the past, I just thought we'd get official language. And as it would point out to me, that's on page 11, Chris.
it's on page 11 of our report under
Yeah.
1D.
Give me just a moment. There's
I would
case
put,
that had
I
a
would
very
put,
similar.
Mr. Chairman, for the record, Michael Large with the DA's office. My recommendation is that that provision on page 11, page D, be modified to read, mobilization to begin at 7 a.m. No construction hours are 7 or 8, was it 8 p.m., Mr. Stanley? Or 8 a.m.?
No, it's mobilization at 7, I think, is what we've done in the past.
Mobilization at 7?
That's right.
And then construction to begin at 8?
Construction to begin whenever they can get mobilized. I mean, that's just the way it would work. We start mobilization at 7. In other words, the gear rolls in at 7. And then whenever they're ready to go, they're ready to go.
So you don't want to modify the construction hours from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.?
Yes, I do. I want it to say mobilization rather than construction.
But you're not putting a time limit on construction. You're not telling us when construction can commence.
It's my opinion and experience that that's not necessary, that once they get the equipment on site at 7, they can begin when they have the equipment on site. Traditionally, what happens is if you say construction at 7, construction companies will mobilize at 4:30, 5 o'clock, and be ready to, and that's what makes all the noise and traffic. And then they're ready to drop the hammer.
I would put mobilization to begin at 7 a.m., construction to cease on site by 7 p.m. And with that modification, for the record, we can incorporate it in the conditions of approval.
Yes, Ms. Julian.
Would it be appropriate to say construction subsequent to mobilization or some reference like that?
Yeah, we'll incorporate construction subsequent to mobilization.
Thank you. Mr. Stanley, do you have enough there to? I'm
Mr.
sorry,
Chairman.
This is closed right now. This is back before the board. So-
Clarification for that verbiage, because I worked construction all my life. No.
Right now, we're closed and it's back before the board for discussion, so we will hopefully work through this. Mr. Stanley, do you have a motion that you're comfortable with that you wish to make?
Not right this second, but I will in just a second here, since I was asking it to be written, but it looks like we're kind of there. Okay, so is it true that we can replace the word construction hours, or 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., to mobilization to begin at 7 o'clock?
If that's what you would like, yes.
Thank you. How about no later than? No earlier than? Is that all right?
Unless you wanted to say on-site mobilization.
Even better. Now let's see if I can get through this. With that condition.
Okay.
I move that, after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Board of Adjustment approve with conditions special use permit case number WSUP 22-0021 for CNS O'Neill Family Trust, with the conditions included in Exhibit A to this matter, including the changes to hours operation to read on-site mobilization to begin no earlier than 7 o'clock, and construction work to be ceased by 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday. Having made all 5 findings in accordance with Washoe County Code Section 110.810.30.
Mr. Stanley, just to be on the record and make sure we're all on the same page, what you're asking for is your amendment be replaced under section 1D, under conditions.
Mr. Chair, that is correct.
Thank you. Is there a second?
For the record, Don, I second that.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Next item up on the agenda is, actually, it's item 8B, and it is WADMIN 22-0019, Birch Care of the Infirmed. Mr. Markey, it's yours.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Mitch Markey, Washoe County Planning, for the record. I'm here to present WADMIN 22-0019, Birch Care of the Infirm. The parcel in question is located in the North Valleys area off Vagabond Court, just kind of north of Lemon Drive there. The parcel is zoned medium density suburban, or MDS. All the adjacent parcels in this neighborhood and kind of surrounding area are also zoned MDS, and many do contain, similar accessory-like structures on the property. The request is for an administrative permit to allow a self-contained travel trailer to be occupied on parcel 080531-06 for use of a care of the infirm patient. The infirm resident will live within the RV, and the caretaker will reside in the home, which she owns. Temporary occupancy for care of the infirm is approved in Washoe County Code, or is an approved use in Washoe County Code, section 110.310.35G. And the main stipulation is that a signed affidavit is required from a Nevada licensed physician, which it is. It's provided in Exhibit D, and the administrative permit must be renewed on an annual basis. There is currently an open code enforcement violation. A code enforcement officer found that a manufactured home on the property had an individual living within it. So in other words, unpermitted RV living. The property owner has been working with code enforcement to resolve the issue. Part of this administrative permit will provide the property owner a pathway to come into code compliance. Right here is just kind of a couple screenshots off Google Earth of the existing conditions of the site and where the current travel trailer is located, right in the front of the property. So Washoe County Code Section 110.310.35G requires that the RV shall be located on a parcel to provide as much screening as practical. For this reason, we've come up with a site recommendation to the back kind of corner of the parcel. This would actually be the southeastern corner of the parcel. I have on the right side is the site plan that was submitted with the RV, and on the left side is the Google Earth photo, just kind of showing the on-the-ground conditions of the parcel. The RV will be set back 7 feet from the side of the parcel and 8 feet from the rear. Per Washoe County Code, no discharge of any litter, sewage, or effluent is allowed to occur as part of this use. The current property is served by municipal water, sewer, and waste management for garbage collection. The Health District did provide a condition that the utility connections be hard plumbed for sewer on site. And then we also added a condition that any electrical utility has to be up to building code standards. So we were able to make all 5 required findings, as you can see on page 7 and 8 in the staff report. And staff recommends approval with conditions, and I've provided a motion here for you. With that, I'll turn it over to the board for any questions you might have. Thank you.
Point of clarification, the code enforcement violation is that someone was living on the property in the RV, and evidently that is the infirmed person. And that if this is approved, then this will resolve the code enforcement violation.
That's correct. As long as they meet all the conditions, relocate the RV, and so on, then yes, they'll be in compliance.
And my only other question is the picture you had up there of where the RV currently is and where it's going to go, will it fit back there in that back corner? The picture I have shows that it's a fairly large RV. That should be kind of in the lower right-hand corner there?
Yeah, so I conducted a site visit and walked the property line with the applicant, and we measured it out while we were on site, and it will indeed fit in that corner.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for this issue? Ms. Julian?
Yes, thank you. Kathy Julian for the record. Then, as part of this, will you be removing the condition on page 12, which says that there will be require the recreational vehicle to either be hard plumbed to the septic system discharge point or only have a flexible hose attached between the recreational vehicle and discharge point when actively discharging gray or black water? That seems to me to be inconsistent with hard plumb. It's either hard plumb or not. I'm a little unclear on that. That seems inconsistent with what was recommended by WCHD on page 17 in their letter, where they said no temporary connections. hoses are flexible will not be permitted.
Yeah, so the condition is meant to be consistent with the health district. So yes, if we would go ahead and remove the
So-
flexible hose language there and
Okay,
have it required to be hard plumbed.
So we
That's
would
correct.
need to say that in a motion to approve this?
I believe so,
Okay.
Mr. Large. With that notation, we can make, if the approval is what is appropriate in this case, I would say that that condition of approval under Washoe County Health District 2A, the reference to the flexible hose will be removed. And when you make the motion, just say with the amendment as stated by council.
And if I might also suggest that on page 11, under item 6, any temporary electrical utility connection shall be to the satisfaction of the planning and building division. So then it's explicit that the only temporary connections are the electrical, if that would be amenable to the board. And my last question is it possible in all of these staff reports to have a simple notation as to how many residents nearby were consulted? And any response, if any?
So we do include that in the staff report under the noticing. I believe this one, we contacted 72 separate parcels within a 500-foot radius of the property.
Okay, and I'm sorry that I didn't see that.
Page 18, I believe.
18, okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right, thank you.
Any additional questions for staff? Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Is the applicant present and wish to address this issue?
I do have the applicant online, but no hands raised from them.
Okay. Thank you. And with that, we will go ahead and open up a public comment. Madam Secretary, are there any public comments?
In chambers, I have Margaret Hoffman.
Thank you for having me talk. I just want to let you know the Birch family are a fantastic family, both of them. Their mom and dad are fantastic people. The dad is a veteran and a Gold Star recipient, Purple Star recipient. They have never bothered anybody. They're clean people. The only time you see them is when they come out once or twice during the day. Their RV does not bother me. I've lived there for 30 years, and I've never had a problem with any neighbor. And this is the first time anything has come around in our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have no further public comment in chambers.
And I have no public comment via Zoom.
Thank you very much. We'll close public comment, bring it back to the board for discussion. Is there any discussion? Mr. Stanley, do you have a discussion issue, topic?
Yes. You know, it seems to me that this is a well-thought-through project that actually, one of the few times where we don't have a lot of heartburn, or at least I don't, about correcting a code enforcement problem with a solution. We've complained about that in the past, about papering over things. This looks like maybe the exception to that rule. And I think it's extremely well laid out. And so I would be in support of it.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I'll entertain a motion. Little baptism under fire here, I guess.
Yeah, well, someone may need to help me with exactly how we amend.
I'll walk you through it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. Hold on. Let me find that section here.
Page 8.
Well, no, it's Oh, page 8.
You should include these.
You go with page 8, and
Okay.
I'll take care of the amendments.
Okay, right. I move that after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, the Board of Adjustment approve administrative permit case number WADMI Min 220019 for Kali Birch with conditions included as Exhibit A to this matter.
With modifications of conditions to A, to remove the reference to the flexible hose, and modifications to 1C6 to include only in any temporary electrical utility connections.
Mr. Large, and
Having made,
I'm sorry for
Oh,
interrupting.
yes.
Mr. Large, just for clarification purposes, and the first thing about the flexible hose was pursuant to section 2A.
2A.
Thank you.
having made all 5 findings in accordance with the Washoe County Development Code, Section 110.808.25. I read all that.
Which include,
Which include consistency, improvements, site suitability, issuance not detrimental.
Excellent. Is there a second?
Mr. Chair, I second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
the
We're
first of
going to-
many motions that she will make.
We're going to take a quick 5-minute recess.
Recording stopped.
You're right, and that's why we repeat this stuff. We have to repeat it because people will miss. I know, and they think they're shot at the water, and the water's not that good. Yeah, that's, I know, but that's why we say what we say.
And the good trout.
Yeah.
And now that's the good trout. And those guys are.
I really got to know that.
Okay, but I'm kind of curious as to why.
I appreciate your precision. It's cool.
Yeah, okay, I'm a little concerned. I'm concerned that, one, I'm concerned I missed the fish
been around forever, man. You've been around forever. That's her first motion. I'm not gonna help you, Brad, you know? You're supposed to know by now.
So rushing variance is up next on the agenda, is that correct? Good thinking. If I ever got one that said deny in red, I'm fine.
All right.
Red like this, I'm not.
We almost got you out of here. We came so close.
Do I?
Should I go run out there?
He'll be back.
We'll give it another minute then. If not, he'll have to catch up.
I'm also not opposed to the Roger Pelham shirt on his last.
The Roger Pelham shirt.
We want to surprise Roger. That's what we want to surprise.
When is his last day? Yeah.
It's July.
It's July 4th. Is it really? Yeah. But then I think he wants that holiday.
Okay, here it comes.
What's that? He wants to be a motorcycle.
Recording in progress.
Okay, we're back in session. Do this, we're back in session. Next agenda item is WPVAR 22-0004, rushing variance. I believe we have staff personnel, Oakley, that's going to address this issue.
Hi, Kat Oakley, Washoe County Planning. I believe that the applicant is online and would like to request to continue this item to date certain November 3rd, which is the next Board of Adjustment meeting.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, is the applicant online with us?
I have Akina Williams. Kina, if you could please unmute yourself and state your first and last name for the record.
Hi there, I'm Kina Williams from Gillenfarb Architecture.
Okay.
And yes, we would like to request a continuance on the variance and postpone the hearing until the next meeting in early November.
And are you representing the applicant, or are you the applicant?
We applied as Gillenfarb Architecture, so we're representing. I guess I'm representing the applicant. Also, the applicant. Yeah.
Okay, and you're speaking on their behalf, correct?
Yes, correct.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
With that, we will, Mr. Large, point of clarification. Do we just go ahead and do the continuance, or is this something that we need to make a motion on?
We do not need to make a motion. However, because this has been noticed, we do need to open it for public comment at this time. If anybody has public comment, and then we can just have it on date certain for the next meeting.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. Madam Secretaries, do we have public comment on this item?
In chambers, I have David Davey, who does not appear to be present. I have no other public comment.
Thank you.
And I have no public comment via Zoom.
Okay. With that, we will go ahead and accept the request from the representative to move this forward to the next scheduled meeting, which is November 3rd, 2022. Next item on the agenda is WPVA R22-0005. Has to, in reference of the barn, and we have Ms. Olander, who is presenting.
Do we have Julie?
She was here a bit ago.
She was here.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would recommend, because Ms. Olander's not here, that we move to the special use permit on number F.
Thank you, Mr. Large. I agree with that. Okay, we will go ahead and set that one aside until we can contact Ms. Olander. In the meantime, we're going to move forward on the agenda to agenda item 8F, which is WSUP 22-0015, Worthen Truck Turnaround. We should have staff present.
Okay, good afternoon. Courtney Wyke, Senior Planner, Washoe County. The item before you is case number WSUP 22-0015, Worthen Truck Turnaround. Okay, the applicant request is for a special use permit for major grading to allow for additional turnaround room for an existing truck repair shop. In response to a stop work order issued by code enforcement for grading beyond the threshold allowed without a permit, the applicant submitted a building permit to abate the grading violation. Upon review of the building permit by planning staff, it was determined that the proposed cut-fill thresholds triggered a grading special use permit per Article 438. The applicant does indicate in the application that about 80% of the grading has already commenced. The application also includes a request to vary specific grading standards, which is allowed via a special use permit approval. Okay, here's a site plan with the overall proposed grading. The project is located at 8640 Canyon River Court in the Truckee Canyon area plan. There is an existing truck repair shop on site. The intent of the grading is to facilitate a wider and safer truck turnaround for the business. The grading would occur predominantly on the southern property line, as you see there in the contour lines. The application is for 1,094 cubic yards of cut material, 4,980 cubic yards of fill material, with a net of 3,886 cubic yards to be imported, disturbing a total of 41,382 square feet, just shy of 1 acre. And here's an aerial overhead where you can see along the southern parcel line where the grading has occurred since this image was taken, where they are planning to expand that parking area. Okay, now we'll get into the specifics of the request to vary grading standards. The first one being section 110.438.45A, grading shall not result in slopes of in excess of or steeper than 3 horizontal to 1 vertical, except as provided in the below criteria. Here is an aerial shot of where the proposed 2.5 to 1 slopes are proposed. Staff does support varying the standard as requested. While the site is already disturbed and developed, it is understood that restricting the grading to 3 to 1 slopes due to the topographical nature of this area would cause additional disturbance. The applicant's engineer states that by allowing the standard exception, the project will reduce the exposed existing slopes by about 12,000 square feet to the design perimeters. Further, the engineering division has indicated they have no objection to the proposed 2.5 to 1 slopes as requested. Okay. Yeah, the second standard requested for to vary from is section 110.438.45B. This is requiring within the required yard setback, fills shall not differ from the natural or existing grade by more than 48 inches. Again, here it highlighted in green shows the area where where the portion of the fill is requested to be varied. Staff does support varying this standard as requested. A majority of the fill and the 15-inch storm drain pipe are already completed and in place. The applicant's engineer states that requiring a maximum of 48 inches of fill in the setback, the fill above the existing and functioning 15-inch pipe would be inadequate. The existing channel slope encourages grading to occur within the setback to reduce the impact and promote proper grading. Again, engineering reviewed the plans and had no issue with the proposed request. And the last standard requesting to be varied is finished grading shall not vary from the natural slope by more than 10 feet in elevation. Again, here is a overhead of the portion where the in purple, where the finished grade would be more than 10 feet. Staff supports varying this standard as requested due to the nature of the existing conditions and the slopes exceeding 2 to 1. The existing depth from top of slope to flow line would be 15.5 feet. The proposed project does not exceed fills any greater than the existing conditions. The intent of the project is to maintain or reduce the maximum fill. A proposed 3-foot berm intended to enhance vehicular safety of the project area is included in the maximum height. The area, I already said that, apologize. This cross-section demonstrates the reduction in space for the truck turnaround if the standards were strictly applied, shown there in blue. The application was sent to all applicable agencies and departments for review, as well as to surrounding property owners as required. No comments in opposition for the special use permit were received. Staff does believe all findings can be made for the request and is recommending approval. And if the board agrees, I have provided a possible motion for your consideration. With that, that concludes my presentation, and I am available for questions.
Thank you very much. I have just one quick question. It says that 80% of this has already taken place within your staff report. The applicant indicates 80% of the grading has already occurred. So what is the 20% that is left to be done?
I don't know that I have drawings or anything stating what's existing versus proposed or what is remaining to be done. I do believe either the applicant is in the room or on the call that might be able to further clarify what exactly is left to be done. I would say just in visiting the site, there's needed improvements to the proposed berm, including revegetation and the requirements for landscaping at a minimum.
Okay, thank you. We'll ask the applicant that also. Any other questions for staff?
Well, I have a generic question. If 80% of it has been done, then how are some of the general conditions that are laid out here? Aren't they, how are they to be done? It seems like it is a done deal and they're not applicable, or are these conditions still applicable? Or which ones of these conditions here are not applicable because essentially it's already done?
I'm just briefly looking over the conditions. Part of it will be remediating or kind of going backwards, if you will, to assure that the conditions of approval have been met. It kind of depends on which condition we're looking at. In looking at this, I think there will be additional documentation provided, additional inspections, and going forward, subject to the conditions of approval if this were to be approved.
Okay, a second question would be, again, and perhaps I need more clarification on why Washoe Story Conservation District comments are not formally incorporated in the conditions, but perhaps you could tell me to what extent have their comments been included in the conditions? And they have a revegetation plan, so I take it there is a revegetation requirement here in the conditions, and if you could just help me out by pointing that out.
Agree, and I may defer to Mr. Bronzik on this. When I first started, I was including Washoe County Washoe Story Conservation District's comments as formal conditions, and the direction was that was not common practice and that we include them as an attachment. However, maybe, Mr. Bronzik, if you want to provide any clarification to why that is, or Mr. Large.
The revegetation aspect of it is within the I believe in condition of approval number, general condition C, 2C under capital engineering discusses the revegetation. The technical assistance from the Washoe County engineer with technical assistance from Washoe Story Conservation District, and the applicant shall submit a revegetation plan to the Washoe Story Conservation District for review. So that's where it is incorporated.
Okay, and if I could follow up, if it's submitted to them just for review, if it's inadequate, is there any, it doesn't say that it needs to be acceptable, does it?
Can you,
I mean, the applicant can submit a revegetation plan to the Washoe Story Conservation District for review, but this statement itself doesn't imply that it has to be approved by them to be acceptable. I mean, how do you get compliance with revegetation?
Okay, so Chris Bronzick, Washoe County Planning. We, as staff, provide Washoe Story Conservation District with almost all of our applications. They are a reviewing agency that provides suggestions. Our engineering, planning, and parks divisions will try to take those conditions and enforce them. So with one of their conditions, with the 2-to-1 rock slope protection, that would violate certain sections of our code. Engineering provided different conditions. The revegetation and the noxious weeds aspect is captured within that 1C. And so these conditions, while they may be in cooperation with Story Conservation District, ultimately are approved and enforced by the specific Washoe County agencies. They have every right to submit to the Conservation District, but at this point, engineering and open space would be the ones regulating that revegetation plan.
And that's captured in methods and seed mix must be approved by the county engineer and tech, right?
That is correct.
Okay, great, thank you.
The Washoe Story Conservation District is not a regulatory agency, so with adopted regulations, so they are advisory only. So that's why you don't see them, that's why they go through engineering or one of the other phases.
That was exactly what I was hoping for
The-
clarification. Thank you, Mr. Large. but-
The powers that be,
Yes.
i.e.
Thank you.
Kelly Mullen, just said that to me. I'm not smart
Okay.
enough to come up with that on my own.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions for staff?
I have a
Mr.
question,
Stanley.
Mr. Chair. I'm a little confused about a couple of things here. You can help me out, I'm sure. To follow up on a question that Mr. Thomas asked, I believe, 80% of the grading is completed per the applicant, yes?
Correct.
Okay. And I believe they said that the 15-inch, if I've got it right, culvert, for want of a better term, is already completed.
Correct.
Okay.
And in place.
And the first question I have, there may be a series here, but first question I have is, since those are already done, are they compliant with code at this point?
At this point, no, for a
Okay.
number of
So
reasons.
this is an
Right.
SUP, this is a classic SUP covers a problem deal?
Correct. This
Okay.
is to try to
Just wanted to make sure I
remediate-
wasn't misspeaking.
Yes, and come
Okay,
into more
there's all-
compliance.
Thank you.
Correct.
So, just for my own interest, when did this code violation come to light?
February of this year.
Thank you. The applicant, and I can't find it, but I did on several other readings in the package, I think, asked for, furthermore, we would like a number of other county code articles and suggestions waived. Could you point me to that area and explain why whether or not that's a good idea?
And so, yes, Courtney White
Please.
for the record. So those were the three code sections out of Article 438 that we went over during the presentation, that they are allowed to request to vary from those specific standards with approval of a special use permit. So it was and I can go over those three standards again.
If you don't mind briefly, and particularly why you think it's a good idea that those should be waived.
Okay. Courtney, did you need the PowerPoint back up?
We could, yeah. I'll
Okay.
just try
Was
and
it
summarize.
slide 2?
It'll start on slide 4.
Slide 4, okay.
You know, to make it some easier and narrow down the question a bit, do those need to be waived for them to come into compliance?
Without it, the applicant is indicating the project may not be feasible, and that they're,
So it's not,
as a,
it's not a code problem then, it's a financial viability problem.
I think maybe we could have the applicant speak to that.
I see.
In some of the renderings, the applicant has indicated in order to achieve the purpose, which is widening the truck turnaround for safer vehicular access, they need to expand into the setback for those three. There's three standards that they need to vary from. And we typically in planning will defer quite a bit to engineering on specifically the 3 to 1 slopes, the max of 10 feet fill. And with engineering's review, they did not provide any comments of concern or opposition as proposed.
Okay, let me try it again. The SUP as requested does not, on the face of it, include the dismissal of these other conditions. The client is asking for those in addition to the SUP that we are to be considering here.
The initial special use permit is for exceeding the maximum grading thresholds for grading without.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
As part of the special use permit, they also have the ability to, in addition, request these standards be varied. So the first component is the special use permit, and then secondly is determining whether or not the board agrees with allowing those standards to be varied.
So the first set is to meet code. Second set is for purposes other than just meeting code.
Right. And the code does allow, with a special use
Such a
permit, to
thing.
vary.
All right, thank you, I think I've got it.
Yeah. A little confusing.
Are there any additional questions for staff? Seeing none, thank you very much. Is the applicant present and wish to speak on this matter?
I do have, I have Nathan Robinson available via Zoom. If you could please unmute yourself and state your first and last name for the record.
Thank you very much. Nathan Robinson, professional engineer with Robinson Engineering, and I am the applicant's representative in this case. I'd be happy to respond in just a little bit more depth to the questions that were raised, but if there are other questions you'd like to bring up specific to us, we're available.
Thank you. Mr. Stanley, did you receive an adequate answer, or do you need any further follow-up from this gentleman?
I just want to hear his concurrence with the answer that was given by planning.
Thank you. Substantial concurrence with the clarification that because the two of the conditions that are characterized as voluntary are due to a ditch existing. And that is a little bit of a gray area in that it's not really 10 feet of fill over natural grade, it's 10 feet of fill over an excavation. And so I don't think without the existence of a drainage channel, we would be up against the code questions of a 10-foot fill or 48 inches of fill within the setback location. So those are technically things we're applying for to be as complete and as transparent as possible, but they're not really advantageous to the owner. If that were a strict application, every time we dug a septic test pit of 14 feet deep, we'd need an SUP to backfill it. So I want to just be a little bit, we're not asking for much there. The 2.5 to 1 slope ratio is steeper than the Washoe County's 3 to 1. And we agree, generally speaking, with that 3 to 1 threshold that protects against erosion, makes revegetation much easier. But as an engineer, we do apply to the Washoe County Engineering Division in cases where a slightly steeper slope doesn't detract from the environment, in which the soils are strong enough to support it without the additional risk of erosion. We believe that is the case here, and it's not uncommon for a 2.5 to 1 or even 2 to 1 slope to be approved by engineering. In discussion with Courtney, we agreed with the health department's comment that a riprap would be less advantageous than a revegetation stabilization, largely for vector control. It's a condominium for ground squirrels, is the way I like to say it. But that extra slope it's a nuance of request, not a complete overhaul. And I think that's the only one that really provides extra area for the operations in a very industrial area, and is in my years of experience, pretty reasonable request for this type of project. I would like to speak to the Washoe Story Conservation District. I have great respect for that institution. We coordinated with them several years ago in detail, and to this day, we have the exact language that they requested be put in our plans as part of the incorporation of the civil plans. Now, that's kind of a backdoor to enforcement, because if it is in the plans and those plans are approved, the contractor has to do it. So I would say that voluntarily, by hiring Robinson Engineering, the owner has opted in to compliance with Washoe Story Conservation District, as I understand their intent. And then kind of the very last thing I would, with great thanks to Courtney for doing a good job presenting this, the 20% characterization of, that's almost a spitball of economic work remaining to do, cleaning up the berm, adding revegetation, and tidying things up. We did not have access to the conditions of approval because the approval hasn't occurred yet. But the way I understand it is, if you do vote in favor of this application, those conditions become additional requirements that they have to comply with, mostly to bring them back into compliance with all of the development code, except for these 3 variances requested. And I think we have no trouble with that, and we're grateful for the process. And it's not the first client I've had who did a little recreational bulldozing, and then we had to kind of get them back into line. And I think this is the appropriate format for it. Written conditions to which we can comply and which can be enforced. So thank you very much. Hope that clears a few things up.
Mr. Chair, if I may, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
All right. Some of these variances requested were pitched, for want of a better term, as necessary for financial viability. Which of the 3 would that be, please?
If I could retract that statement, I would.
Okay, well, that's enough said, because it was
Okay.
odd. So we'll just look past that, or at least I will. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Are there any additional questions for this gentleman? I guess the only question I have, it's kind of the elephant in the room, is you're coming to us after the fact, after 80% of the grading has already taken place and the code enforcement had to come out there. Why, what was the failure to comply in the first place with getting the SUP to do so?
Of course, I can't look into another person's soul, but the adjacent property was actually A&K Earth Movers, and Robinson Engineering designed an almost identical ditch infill in coordination with Tumwa several years ago. And my interpretation is that the westerly neighbor to that easterly parcel said, that looks like a good idea. Let's kind of continue it. And in good faith, again, because the ditch infill is not intuitive as triggering that 10 feet of fill over natural grade, I think they just proceeded to make the parcel match what the neighbors were in both usefulness and character. It's not uncommon. Most of us don't walk around knowing that there's a 10-foot threshold the same way we do that you shouldn't jaywalk. So I think there was no ill intent, but probably a commercial or industrial parcel owner should have anticipated that permitting would be required and failed to in this case.
Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate that. Any other comments for this gentleman? Mr. Robinson, thank you very much. Madam Secretary, are there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this matter?
I have no hands raised via Zoom.
And I have no public comment in chambers.
Thank you. We'll close public comment, bring it back to the board for discussion. Is there any discussion on this matter? Not seeing anyone, I will accept a motion.
This is Rob for the record. I move that after given reasonable consideration due to the information contained in staff report and information received during the public hearing. The Washoe County Board of Adjustments approve with conditions special use case permit WSUP 22-0015 for Richard and Lorraine Worthern, with the conditions included in Exhibit A to this matter, having made all 5 findings in accordance with Washoe County Code Section 110.810.30, consistency, improvement, site suitability, issuance not detrimental, and no effect on the military installation.
Thank you. Second?
For the record, Don, I second that motion.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Next item on the agenda is we're going back to item 8E, which is, which is 8E, which is W, is this the same one here? Yes. WPVAR 22-0005, the Cernock Barn. And I believe Ms. Olander will be making the presentation.
Good afternoon, Julie Olander with Planning and Building, and I do apologize. I miscalculated. I was up in my office, and you moved a little more quickly than I had anticipated on the item before mine. So the item you have before you is a variance, a request for a variance to approve a variance from 50 feet to 40 feet in order to facilitate the conversion of an existing barn into a new detached accessory dwelling. It's located out in Washoe Valley off Lakeside Drive. And just a little background on this property. The property owner submitted a permit for the accessory dwelling. And during that process, we realized that the barn was too close to the property line. What's happened out there is the zoning has changed. So originally the property was zoned A1, First Agricultural District, and the required setbacks were 12 feet. However, the property was rezoned by the county when we did an update to our development code in 1993, and the zoning was changed to low-density rural, and the setbacks were changed from 12 feet to 50 feet. The barn was constructed in 91, so that's the reason the barn is constructed in the manner it was. So the applicant's requesting for this variance from 50 feet to 40 feet to convert the barn into the accessory dwelling unit. And just per Nevada statute, there are 3 reasons you can approve a variance. One is exceptional narrowness and shallowness or shape of a specific piece of property by reason, or number 2 is by reason of exceptional topographic conditions or other extraordinary or exceptional situation or condition of the piece of property. The applicant is requesting this variance per number 3. They believe it's an extraordinary and exceptional situation, and that the property owner has indicated that the change from 12 feet to 50 feet for the side setback is exceptional, and also that the property owner should be able to convert a legally constructed structure into an accessory dwelling unit. Staff did advise the applicant to apply for the variance. We said that they might meet the exceptional an extraordinary and exceptional situation, and that could be a possible way to move forward with developing this existing barn into a detached accessory structure. So here's a layout of the property. See, I've highlighted the barn, and then you can see the residence is to the right. And then also you can see that I've highlighted in yellow the 50-foot setback, and then you can see the 12-foot that's up to the top of the screen. As I said, the proposal is to change the setback from 50 feet to 40 feet. There are other properties in the area that were developed in the 90s under the same A1 side yard setback of 12 feet. And so they're throughout the neighborhood, you'll see these outbuildings that are closer than the 50 feet. And that staff does not believe that the 10-foot difference would be detrimental to the neighborhood and properties because they're already existing. Also, the barn is proposed to be converted into a detached accessory structure, and this is the proposed look. So this would be an improvement to the existing look of the barn. So it would be an improvement to the neighbors they'd have a nice-looking building there versus an old barn. Staff sent this application to the various agencies, and there are conditions, they're included in your conditions of approval, and staff is able to make all the findings as shown in your staff report. I provide a possible motion, but the applicant is also here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Olander. Any questions for staff? Mr. Stanley?
Julie, is the footprint of the dad going to be the same as the barn then?
Julie Olander, for the record, yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for kind of going over the exception to the other three.
Oh, sure.
So this is Rob for the record. Julie, for my own clarification, there's no grandfather clause?
There is not. So this is the only option they had to move forward to get the barn converted over to the accessory dwelling unit.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, thank you. Is the applicant present, wish to speak on this matter?
I believe he's just available for questions if you have any questions for him.
Thank you very
He does not have
much.
a presentation.
Are there any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close that and bring it to public comment. Madam Secretary, is any public comment on this matter?
I have no public comment in chambers.
And there's no public comment via Zoom.
Excellent. We'll go ahead and close public comment, bring it back to the board for discussion. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, it looks to me very well explained, very clean. The harm, if there was one, was not the fault of the applicant, but by a rezoning. The footprint hasn't exceeded, and there are already examples of this being in place. So I would be voting in favor.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is Rob for the record. I'm in favor of this also.
Thank you. I would like to weigh in on this too. The barn was built in 1991. There was a code change in 1993. And it's kind of like the county was moving the goalposts. You know, you had a structure that was already there, and all you want to do is now that it's going to be an accessory building, it's now in violation when before it was, in fact, within the parameters. So I have no problem with this also. Any other comments? If not, I will entertain a motion. Mr. Stanley.
Mr. Chair, I move that after given reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Board of Adjustment approve variance case number WPVAR 22-0005 for Barry M. Cernock and Jean M. Roofer, with the conditions of approval included as Exhibit A for this matter, having made all 5 required findings in accordance with Washoe County Development Code, Section 110.804.25, including special circumstances, no detriment, no special privileges, use authorized, and no effect on a military installation.
Thank you. Second?
This is Rob, I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Pierce. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Okay. Moving on. We have, next item on the agenda is WSUP 22-0017, Montgomery Lee, Dedar. And we have staff present.
Mr. Chairman, Michael Large for the record. Before we begin, I just need to make a disclosure. Ms. Lee, who is the applicant property owner in this, works in my office. There's been no discussion between my office and Ms. Lee in regard to this matter, and there isn't any type of conflict.
No pecuniary interest in this?
No, Mr. Chairman.
I've paid attention in the past when you've asked us those questions, that's all.
He likes to say
Okay, let's move forward. Go ahead.
Okay, good afternoon. Courtney Wyke. The case number before you today is WSUP 22-0017, and this is for Montgomery /Lee Dadar. The applicant request is for a special use permit to approve a 702 square foot detached accessory dwelling unit on the same parcel where a approximately 2,500 square foot primary residence is located. The parcel has a regulatory zone of medium density suburban and is located in the southeast Truckee area plan. Medium density suburban regulatory zone does require a special use permit for detached accessory dwellings. The setbacks for MDS are 20 feet in the front and rear and 8 feet on the sides. The proposed DAD would meet all of the MDS required setbacks. The accessory dwelling is proposed to be located in that southeastern corner of the parcel. The proposed detached accessory dwelling would include 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, kitchen, and living room, and would be required to be architecturally compatible with the primary residence. The application was sent to all applicable agencies for review. The parcel is currently receiving water service from the Truckee Meadows Water Authority. Conditions of approval require the applicant to provide a letter of acknowledgement from TOMWA, which indicates the adequacy of water rights to support the new proposed DAD. The parcel is served by a private on-site sewage disposal system. Conditions of approval indicate the exact location and design of the on-site sewage disposal system will be subject to review and approval during the building permit process. In addition, notice was sent to adjacent neighboring property owners as required by NRS, and no comments in opposition were received by any parties. Staff believes all required findings can be made and recommends approval of the request, and I have provided a motion for your consideration if you agree. With that, that concludes my presentation, and I am available for questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Is that Mr. Stanley?
Thank you. When you were evaluating this situation, did you see any issue with, on the site visit that I had, Kivett Lane is kind of notoriously thin, much like the Thomas Creek Road. You don't anticipate any difficulty there with, from a roadway standpoint for grading equipment and so forth?
No, not that I am aware of, and I would hope too that our engineering division, if there was any specific concerns related to the roads, that would be known, but no.
Okay, and the second thing is a minor issue, but on, since we're being precise these days, on page 7, across from Washoe County Engineering and Capital Projects, I have either been mispronouncing his name for years, or we've got a typo there for Dwayne's name.
For Dwayne Smith?
Yeah.
Oh, Dwayne,
Yeah.
Dwanye. You know, and that's auto-generated. I think we'll
Yeah,
work
no, it's not my thing to
with
catch those, but I
our
did.
staff to get that corrected.
And-
But
and-
thank you for pointing that out.
Oh, you're welcome. And again, this goes back to the advisory nature of the Conservancy Group. But is there any mention in the, landscaping that a triad would be required in conditioning?
I am not aware that off the top of my,
Yeah, I didn't see it, that's just,
yeah, that doesn't sound familiar.
but it was, I think,
In-
recommended, yes?
In the Washoe County, or sorry, Washoe story.
Condition of approval 2B references the Washoe Story District again.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I think that does it for me, thank you.
I have a
No,
question.
yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Kathy Julian, for the record. It would be helpful, and thank you for mentioning it in your oral presentation, it would be helpful to have the public notice section in this report, reporting how many people were contacted and no reply or whatever. That would be great. And also, you mentioned that the design of the accessory dwelling unit would be consistent with the existing house. But I can't find that in the conditions. Can you point me to it here? I may be missing this. We had a lot to review.
I do believe the staff report references it, but it does not appear that I'm seeing a specific condition of approval. That could be something that we could, if you agree to add as a condition of approval, that we just simply state that that is required.
Okay. Okay, I personally would support doing that simply because it makes it consistent with what was recommended and as well with the staff report. That's all I have, other than a general question. How big is the ADU? How many square feet?
702 square feet.
Thank you.
For the record, Exhibit C in the staff report does reference the notice requirement. And that is consistent in all of our staff reports, that we're noticed, who has been noticed, and if there are comments, they are usually incorporated by the staff.
Thank you, Mr. Large. Yeah, that's on page 21 of our staff report. Mr. Stanley.
Mr. Chair, as long as we went down the road of the house looks similar to the new dad, would there be a problem with adding the condition also recommended by that group that a tree be added to the landscape plan? Same reason.
I believe you very well could add that as an additional component to the condition. In my understanding with Mr. Large's comments, that it is incorporated somewhat by reference, the Washoe story comments. But if we want to make it more clear, I don't see.
A little bit more explicit, like
exactly.
The house issue.
I don't see any reason why we
and do
couldn't,
we need to,
but I will.
Anybody need to clear that with the applicant, or how does that work?
We could. Miss Lee is and has been patiently waiting and is available if you wanted to ask her directly.
Okay. It seems like that would be a good idea.
Okay.
Mr. Stanley, that again would come to a motion as an amended condition if you wanted to add trees to that.
Are you suggesting that we don't need to ask the applicant, or since they're available?
Well,
we're asking a
it's
condition.
the board's decision as to what we want to add to conditions. The applicant, of course, can either agree to it or oppose it.
Yeah, we've done that in the past, you'll recall.
Right, but by the same token, it still rests with this board as to a condition. If you want to see if she's in favor of that, then you can go ahead and do that.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions for staff? Seeing none, the applicant is present. Mr. Stanley, do you want to ask her a question?
Sure. Hi. Would you be amenable to adding a condition about adding a tree?
Andrea Lee, for the record. Just want you to know that there's probably already maybe 6, 8, 10 trees over in that area. I mean, I guess we could add another tree if that's really important, but there's a lot of trees there already, and they're very healthy.
Yeah, I did a site visit, and I was proud of your trees.
So you saw a lot of them then. Yeah, they're coming back to life. They were ignored for a long time, but we're bringing them back.
Mostly Chinese elms, it looked like, as I recall.
I don't know. I know there's an apple tree and a peach tree or something, and then a bunch of other trees.
Okay. But you'd be amenable to adding a tree if it was requested, if it were requested as a condition?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions for the applicant? Yes, Mr. Christensen.
Ms. Lee, in the special use permit application supplemental, item number 4, the answer to the question was, the dwelling unit is intended for use by family members. There are no impacts from this proposed use. Can you kind of explain to me I'm a landlord. Okay, if I were to do this, I would rent it out. I'm just curious on what your intent is.
So I have a disabled sister, and she lives in Carson City, so I make a lot of trips down there, and it would be easier for both of us if she were living on the property, but we still had our own privacy. So this is why she would be living in the home. And so from my perspective and hers, we don't see where there's going to be any major impact of negative to anybody.
That's probably the best answer I've heard yet.
Really?
Thank you
well,
very much.
The truth always.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Any more questions for the applicant? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Secretaries, are there any public comment on this item?
Sorry, microphone issues. I have no public comment registered in chambers.
Okay.
And I have no public comment on Zoom.
Thank you. With that, we'll close public comment, bring it back to the board for discussion. Is there any discussion on this? Mr.
I
Stanley?
do have a question. I think it might be for Chris. I'm not sure. Chris, when we get a recommendation for, in this case, a tree from the Conservancy Group, it doesn't stipulate type or size, yes?
Typically, no, it does not.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion?
My only comment is to have in the motion the consistency of the color roofing with the main dwelling.
Comments? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
I think the question is, who will Mr. Large help through this?
I'm happy to help with the amendments to conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Large. Yes, okay, well, let me sort this out first. Mr. Stanley, are you still recommending that a tree be added?
I think, yes, and agreed with the other suggestion from the Conservancy Group that the house color and be similar to the original dwelling.
Okay.
And roofing.
And roofing, yeah.
And Ms. Julian, that was your take on this. You wanted color consistency and roofing?
Well, as long as it makes sense. I mean, consistency in the design.
Okay.
I mean, from my perspective, the issue is the neighborhood, the consistency with the existing property. It is an aesthetic issue, but that's what matters to neighbors, the aesthetic issues. So I don't want to be too prescriptive, but I think that's where the conservation people come from.
Okay, well, with that, we know what some of the added conditions are, and again, I will entertain a motion.
I will make a motion. Kathy Julian, for the record, I move that after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Board of Adjustment approve with conditions to include
An addition of one tree and that the building, the accessory dwelling have architectural compatibility with the surrounding dwelling.
the adjacent building.
The adjacent building.
Yes. Special use permit case number WSUP 22-0017 for Andrea Lee Trust with the conditions included as Exhibit A to this matter. Oops, I should have put the conditions there. All right. Having made all 5 findings in accordance with Washoe County Code Section 110.810.30, consistency, to include consistency, improvement, site suitability, issuance not detrimental, effect on a military installation.
Mr. Chair, is it just my hearing, or did I miss the tree?
No, the tree was added.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Moving on to the next agenda item, number 9, chair and board items. Item A is future agenda items. Are there any future agenda items the board would like to be added? Seeing none, thank you.
I've got a question that fits into this category, Clay.
Okay. Go
There
ahead.
are 2 things that our new board member has, I don't want to say uncovered, but brought up again that have been a concern of mine for a long time. And they are these, that we need to in my opinion, we need to be more precise about what the Conservancy group, whether it's just advisory, or we need to, what would be nice if there was some way to endow them with the capability of making the recommendations be real recommendations. That may be a political issue. That's issue number 1. Issue number 2 is, and I think it was well positioned, and again, this could be in the wrong slot for consideration, but when we have a blank in the responding agencies, there either needs to, I think the easiest way to deal with this might be for the letters that go out to say, no response equals we have no problem, or that we concur. Silence is advocacy, or whatever the legal expression is. I can't recall right now. That hole in the matrix has been a problem for me for quite some time, but you just bring it up, and I thought maybe it was just a peculiarity of mine, but it seems like a logic problem. It's an if-then-else situation with a hole in it.
Those are issues we can put on the agenda for a future discussion from staff.
Thank you, Mr. Large. I think that actually covers B, which is requests for information from staff. Is there anything else, Mr. Stanley?
As I recall from our last meeting, maybe the one before that, wasn't there a request about information about BCC, the BCC results on when we voted against, and it was an appellate issue, I believe. I think you, Mr. Chair, asked specifically for
there was a request for data. I'm going to say that Trevor's compiling that, and he's not here today. How about that for an answer?
That's acceptable.
We will bring that one back. We haven't forgotten.
And I want to add to it. There was to follow along with Clay's. I said I would also like to know. I think the board would also like to know how many of those appeals that were passed were self-represented. And I think Trevor threw something at me, but I'd still like to ask that question.
Okay. We could see if we can get that information for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, Director and Legal Counsel items. Report on previous Board of Adjustment items. Anything to report?
Nothing.
Thank you. Legal information and updates.
Nothing from legal.
Thank you. Madam Secretaries, is there any public comment at this time?
I have no public comment in chambers.
And there's no public comment on Zoom.
Thank you. We're adjourned.